Okay, it looks like it's that time to get started. Good evening. My name is John Goldrich. I am one of the members of the Let's Talk Alliance, and I want to welcome you here to an event that's co-hosted by OLLI and Let's Talk Alliance, along with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We're glad to have everyone here for a healthy and hearty discussion associated with inclusive excellence and the idea of racism. We are pleased to have here as panelists two individuals that I know well from the University of Nebraska. First, we have Dr. Marco Barker, and we have Dr. Karen Kassebaum. Let me give you a little brief information about the two, and then I will turn it over to them. Dr. Barker serves as the inaugural Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He previously served in diversity leadership roles in Westminster College, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Louisiana State University. He currently leads the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which shapes the policies, protocols, and practices needed to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the university. He's engaged in the past in research and publications. And finally, he is certified as a qualified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory. Now we have Dr. Kassebaum. She serves as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Inclusion, Leadership, and Learning, serving as a leader of diversity education for institution-wide learning and engagement. Dr. Kassebaum develops and coordinates efforts for institutional-wide diversity education while also developing programs on our campus that help us become more diverse and understanding in the area of staff searches, onboarding people, and retention efforts at the university. He has served in the role previously as Director of Staff Diversity and Inclusion for the Human Resource Department and Director of Student Recruitment for the College of Education and Human Science. She is the founder and CEO of Athletes to Athletes. And finally, she's an active member of our community. I now turn it over to Dr. Barker and Dr. Kassebaum.
Thank you so much, John, for that great introduction. So we're going to talk about Zoom etiquette. I would like for you to select your speaker view and use the video option only when you're speaking. And don't worry, you'll get time to speak tonight. Stay on mute if you're not talking. Add your pronouns to your name, and that is optional. So if you hover over your name, 3 dots on the right-hand corner will show up, and you can rename and put your pronouns. And then during the program, please accept the breakout room invitation when prompted. Inclusive excellence. The University of Nebraska is committed to cultivating an inclusive, excellent mindset across our institution. We believe in fully embracing diversity in all forms, seen and unseen, making inclusion a top priority, promoting equity across our policies and practices, and ultimately ensuring that excellence is inclusive. Inclusive excellence builds on the notions of diversity, inclusion, and equity.
First I want to apologize. I'm not using my video. I have a bit of a bad connection, and so I don't want to freeze on you. So I'm going to keep my video hidden, but absolutely here with you today. We were asked to share a bit about our office and how we're structured. I didn't want to get into details just for the sake of time. I think we have a great deal to discuss today, and particularly what's happening in our nation. So I want to make enough time to have those conversations. But what I thought I would just share with you is that with our office, we absolutely have the expectation that diversity and inclusion is happening across the entire university. So when our office was created last year, I think there was a sense that only one office would be doing diversity and inclusion. That is not our philosophy. We believe the entire university, that everyone has a role to play in diversity and inclusion. And so we are organized accordingly. So I would say that we have two primary functions for our office. That is to facilitate and to lead. And so part of that work is in a number of areas. I would say that we really believe in the 4 C's, that we're doing this work by communicating, consulting with different entities, coordinating efforts across the entire university, and then celebrating or recognizing, increasing awareness around diversity and inclusion. We do that with faculty. Again, you can see all those pillars here. What I would point to is that actually, I would say tonight represents our efforts to engage external and community members like yourselves, and that we're doing that through our leadership and learning umbrella. Each of these components has a leader or a point of contact, and so today you are interacting with 2 of those. With the external and community engagement, I lead those efforts, and then Dr. Kassebaum is our point of contact or leader for the leadership and learning. And so these components intersect, interact, cross over, overlap, and so that's really how our office is organized. Next slide. So Karen provided you a definition of inclusive excellence. It's a term that we're using at UNL. And we generally, when we have more time, go through a number of definitions, but we're going to sort of jump to some key definitions just for tonight's conversation. And one of the definitions that we often discuss on our campus or in the college setting is this term equity. And it's one that's not used very often. I would say that more than not, the term equality is often used, and you probably hear that more often. And so we certainly believe that we can't have equality, so we can't be in a place where everyone is equal unless we have equity. And what equity really points to is this notion that there has certainly been historical treatments or actions that were set in motion that impacts us today, right? So it sort of forces us, which is sometimes challenging, but it forces us to look back in history to think, what decisions were made in history that now have a real impact today? And so how do we address those? So it's about eliminating barriers, creating opportunities. Often there are particular populations that were most impacted by past experiences and treatments. And so we have to be thoughtful about how do we create, again, equal access and participation in programs and support so that the gaps that exist that, again, are a result of these historical treatments can be addressed. And so equity allows us to then have a conversation, next slide, Jerry, about this term white supremacy. And I often tell people to take a deep breath. Often when we hear this, it sort of sometimes makes the hairs on our neck stand up, right? So people have been throwing out this term white supremacy, white supremacists. And so we want to take some time and really talk about what this term means. I think often when the term is used, there's not really the adequate amount of time to really talk about it and discuss it. And so we want to introduce that because right now the conversations that are taking place in our country around anti-racism, this is one of the terms that's really important to know before we can talk about racism itself. So now we won't be talking about, so there are such things as white supremacists or white supremacy groups where more individuals. That's not quite what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about more of the system of white supremacy, but it's the general notion that things that are central, that things that are perceived as white or being more white-centered is preferred. Practices are based on this, and so we'll slowly kind of peel back the onion on this thing about how this plays out so that you feel like you have a good sense of the term. So again, we're not talking about people in particular. Again, there are white supremacists that exist, but more about what might it look like, white supremacy as a system of things. So practices, behaviors, patterns that may reflect that someone, again, being white is preferred, or that being white is better, and those who are not white are not as good, or in some cases are bad. So this as a system. Next slide. So I want you, so if we think about, again, this notion that being white is better or being white is preferred as a system, I want you to think about, and maybe chat if some things come to mind, what might be examples of white supremacy as a system? So what might be examples or indications that there's a sense in our country that either being white is preferred or is better? So just kind of take a few seconds, and if some things come to mind, there's a chat function at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll down, it looks like a call-out box called chat. You can click that, and then type what you think might be examples of this as a system. These are really good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So a few that's been shared. White flight, and so for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, it was a term in sociology used to describe that what often happened in neighborhoods is that neighborhoods that might have been, or areas that may have been predominantly white, as non-white homeowners or individuals move into those neighborhoods, into those communities, what you saw was that white homeowners or white persons began to move, and this was described as white flight, that there was a real intentionality about moving out of a neighborhood because it was becoming more diverse. And that certainly, I think there was another point about unequally funded schools, public schools. What ended up happening is we know that public schools are funded by tax base. They're tax-based. And so as you had individuals who oftentimes were more affluent moving out, that certainly reduced the tax base for schools. And so you end up with this real inequity in schools that exists. And even without white flight, certainly in different neighborhoods, it being tax-based is absolutely connected to economics. And we know that that is, and we understand that that being connected to certainly racial demographics. Absolutely. There was a posting about advertisements. So I suspect that was to assume who shows up in advertisements is also a part of that. Again, even, which is really interesting, if we think about our biases in our country, that Christian biases, so Christianity tends to be the central norm, and then everything else is sort of feels not normal. And so the way that we celebrate, what we recognize, what we get paid holidays for, like those are great examples sort of this central and what's important and what's not. Absolutely, toys and dolls. And if we think back historically, now there's been a movement to have greater diversity with toys and dolls, but very early on, most of those toys and dolls being white, right? Sort of the part. So all of these are really great examples. Next slide. So for those of you who may still be thinking, you know, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this as a system. Here are some questions that I like to pose to people that you're thinking about what may be evidence of, again, white supremacy as a system. So this ideal about what's considered most important, what's considered valued. So in education, in history books, what are the topics most covered? How much did we learn about Black history or Latino, Hispanic, Chicano history, or leadership? So who's chosen? Who's in leadership? Symbols. So this is a great example in terms of the advertisement, but what is mostly celebrated? What's mostly recognized? Who's mostly recognized? Our laws and our policies. So who do they most advantage? Are there certain communities that are policed more than others? I think there was a great example in the chat about gated communities. So what communities are gated and which ones are not, right? So these are all great indicators. Economics. who can most afford what, right? So we look at home ownership. There are some real disparities that we notice in terms of who mostly owns homes. Healthcare, who receives the best treatment. In terms of healthcare studies or any medical studies, who are the actual study participants? That's also telling in terms of who's mostly studied. We know that historically, early on, most of the medical studies were actually done on white men, right? So a lot of the healthcare was designed for men and not for women. In the same case, we can have the same conversation, how that plays out in terms of race. Again, rewards, who and what is mostly valued, what gets recognized. In the same way that we think about, there was a study that looked at resumes, and individuals with more European names were often selected more times than not than those who had more ethnic or more cultural names in terms of their applications. And so there are some different indicators that we get that there's something about we really value that. And I use on this slide the term mostly. There are always exceptions, right? There will always be exceptions. It doesn't apply 100% of the time. But when we see a pattern that points that it's mostly this, then that absolutely points to a pattern or a system. So again, these are questions that you can start thinking about. If we think about our own city of Lincoln, who's mostly been mayor? Who's mostly been chief of police? Who are mostly the CEOs? Who gets mostly recognized? I mean, these are questions we begin to ask ourselves, and then how does that come to be? So I want to share an example. I'm going to show a video, and this is going to be it's an interview with Muhammad Ali, and I want you to hear him sort of describe this idea, this notion about white supremacy as a system. You may press play, Jerry.
It is an incredible privilege to be here this evening to have a chat with you. Thank you so, so much for being here. I have been a criminal defense lawyer almost my entire career. And the best movie ever made about a criminal defense lawyer is Anatomy of a Murder. Jimmy Stewart has a great line in that movie that I learned and has been with me as I've been a criminal defense lawyer. And the line he has is, people aren't just one thing. A person can be a good father, a good brother, and also a bank robber. A person can be a good mother, a kind community member, and also a drug addict. And countries aren't just one thing. America is a great country. And America is a country that was founded on the premise of white supremacy and white superiority. I'm not going to pull any punches in my comments tonight, but what I am going to do is ask you to think about America in perhaps a slightly different way, and to think about where we started and how we started and how ingrained white supremacy has become in America. It's become so ingrained that we don't even notice it. And one way to think about this is to check this, because about 50 years ago, Muhammad Ali went to Great Britain, and he was interviewed about America, and he tried to talk about white supremacy with a little bit of humor. And I'd like you to listen to what he had to say.
Things are getting much better, but I always wondered when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I go out, travel these countries, and watch how their people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? Just white with blonde hair and blue eyes. Why does the Lord suffer all white men? Angels are white. Who? And Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally we go to heaven. I said, well, what happened to all the black angels when they took the pictures? said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. I said, listen, you quit saying that, boy. I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now? Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. They have a lot of bathrooms in heaven. So anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why. You know, Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. I saw this white man swinging around Africa with a diaphone hollering, oh! Do you all see Tarzan over here? Right. Tarzan? And all the Africans, he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals, and the Africans been there for centuries, and he can't talk to the animals. Only Tarzan can talk to the animals. I always wondered why Miss America was always white. All the beautiful brown women in America, beautiful suntans, beautiful shades, all type complexions, but she always was white. And Miss World was always white. And Miss Universe was always white. And then you got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado flow wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake. I said, Mama, why is everything white? I always wondered, you know, and the president lived in the White House. And Mary had a little lamb, his feet as white as snow and Snow White. And everything was white. Santa Claus was white. And everything bad was black. The little ugly duckling was the black duck. And the black cat was the bad luck. And if I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. I said, Mama, why don't they call it white mail? They lie too. I was always curious, and then this is when I knew something was wrong. Won the Olympic gold medal in Rome, Italy. Olympic champion, the Russian standing right here, and the Pole right here. Is Poland considered a communist country? Yeah, I'm defeating America's so-called threats, enemies. And the flag is going, dun, 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 dun. I'm standing so proud. Dun, 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 dun. And I done whooped the world for America. Dun, 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 dun. I took my gold medal, thought I'd invented something. I said, man, I know I'm going to get my people freedom there. I'm the champion of the whole world, Olympic champion. I know I can eat downtown now. And I went downtown that day, had my big old medal on and went to breakfast. At that time, black things weren't integrated. Black folks couldn't eat downtown. And I went downtown and I sat down and I said, you know, a cup of coffee, hot dog. He said, the lady said, we don't serve Negroes. I was so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. Just give me a couple of I'm the Olympic gold medal. And 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man. Now he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise no money. They put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought and daddy fought in all the wars. Just wanted the gold medal and couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. And this is a difficult topic and a difficult subject, in part because our history has been stolen from us. And it was done intentionally and purposefully. And when you are asking a human being to reject what they have been brought up with, what they have been taught by their parents as the truth, what they have seen in their schools and in their colleges and universities as the truth, when you're asking somebody to all of a sudden say, that's a lie, and the truth beneath that is really ugly, you're asking for somebody to do a really hard thing. And I think it's important for us to remember that as we talk about these discussions. But a hard thing is where we are, and a hard thing is what we have to do.
So And watching that, you know, I'm always reminded, and I think we have to remind ourselves that when we start talking about the work we have to do on race, it is a hard thing to talk through and is a hard thing to do because of our history. Like, we are so proud to be Americans, and we're so proud to be in the U.S., but we also are part of a country that has a very difficult history. And the way in which systems work, the way in which white supremacy as a system works, is that it often works in a way that it's so natural that we don't even realize what the central belief is, right? If we think back to the start of our country, and that in our Constitution, in our laws called for segregation. Our laws called for people to be treated differently very intentionally. That was part of the building of our country. That history, certainly while those laws may not look the way they look today, that the outcomes of that past treatment has absolutely whittled its way, filtered its way, embedded its way down, so much so that sometimes we don't even realize that those very early principles that were so problematic are still centralized today. So that's part of why I sort of pose those questions to you, to really be thoughtful about, again, what's been our history of presidents? We've had one president who was non-white. All other presidents have been. That is a result of something. We think about our history books and what history we learned, that oftentimes even history on indigenous and native communities was often voided outside of talking about the early pilgrims, right? And that there was a very intentionality not to include that in a real in-depth history in our history books. If we think about our teachers, how many of us had a teacher of color growing up, right? And what that meant, or what that means. Thinking about CEOs and who's in the C-suite. I even speak for myself and being a part of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, which I love. On the president's cabinet, I am the only person of color, right? So again, there are still these indications that we have work to do in our country. And while there are always exceptions, recognizing when something is an exception versus it being a pattern. It's the pattern that we wanted to be able to be thoughtful about and be reflective of. And so as we move towards thinking about why does all of this matter? Like, why do we need to be mindful and recognize that it is part of a system? Does that mean that we're hopeless? Absolutely not. Part of our office, part of why we do this work, part of why I'm hoping that OLLI and the Let's Talk Alliance invited us to be a part of this is because there is absolutely things that we can do. And part of how we address white supremacy as a system that can feel so large and so huge is to be able to start addressing that system, which means that we have to practice anti-racism. And so I want to pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Kassebaum.
Thank you. So, did you know, on this day in 1929, more than 200 Black residents of North Platte, Nebraska were terrorized by a white mob and forced to flee, leaving behind their homes forever. To overcome racial inequity, we must confront our history. Did you know? I want you to take this poll and let me know, did you know that fact? Yeah. All right. So it looks like we had 94% that did not know and 6% that did. I didn't know this fact either, but this demonstrates how important it is for us to know our state history. Our history around race is just important as our own histories related to race and injustice and inequity. This is why it's so important in school systems that we're teaching all the history. So now we're going to do an activity. If you could please either write down these two questions or use your cell phone to take a photo. We're going to go into breakout rooms. And when we get in the breakout rooms, I'd like you to find a person who'd be willing to report back, and you're going to get to report back your 1 minute of the discussion. You're going to come back and summarize in 1 minute. Pick someone in your group or get someone to volunteer. But you're going to discuss for 10 minutes. Do you believe that racism can be eradicated? And then explain. And what can be done to eradicate racism? Looks like everybody is back. So we're gonna go ahead and share. I hope you enjoyed your conversation. We're gonna go ahead and start sharing. And if everybody could go ahead and put on mute, and then the person that is speaking will unmute themselves. I'll say your name, and then you can unmute and share. We're gonna start with Tracy Way.
Hi. Well, in our group, we talked about how we've made some progress, but we are far from eradicating white supremacy, and that sometimes we're not even, you know, aware of situations, and we're, you know, hopeful that we're making progress, but we realize that there's more work to be done.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tracy. We're gonna have, the next one will be D, is it Tanak?
You're as close as you need to come, and you got D, that's great. You know, I'm staring at this screen, and boy, eradicate is a strong word. Woo.
Yes.
But just like listening to the video, just becoming more and more aware. We all shared, well, there were things we hadn't even thought about. So to continue to bring those things to the surface so we can start thinking about it and realizing it. And all of us, I think, on this event this evening are old enough to remember back when, and things have got better. It doesn't mean they're where they need to be. It doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go. But in the last 60 years, some things have improved. However, the political climate has certainly brought to the surface these other groups and their organization, and maybe they've already been there, but seem to be so organized and verbal at this time. And then the kind of ending of our minutes, we spent a little bit talking about schools, and maybe some of our school districts are doing well, although I know still, as far as teachers, we are far short of having teachers from a variety of other cultures, and we've got a long way to go as far as recruiting teachers. And I guess that would be it for now.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. All right, Susie Harder.
That's me. Well, we kind of would echo the first two people. The term eradicate, I don't know that we can totally eradicate it. To me, it would mean changing the hearts of every person in our country and our world. And I don't know, but we can do our very best to get rid of it as best we can and reduce it. And by that is, we have to start, first of all, by listening, and that's participating in this event right here. Mm-hmm. and educating ourselves, becoming aware of all of those things that are going on around us that we didn't think about before. And the book that I'm reading, I shared, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. One of his focuses is on policy changes and how important changing those policies, whether they be economic or educational, healthcare, a lot of things need to be done. But for us right now, we got to start, educate ourselves, listen, and just be aware of our behavior.
So good. That's so good. Yes. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Sandy B. Sandy at Blankenship.
Okay.
You're on mute, Sandy.
I hit it.
There
Okay.
you go.
Okay. I am reporting for this group, and we thought that we've made some progress, just like the others have said, but we felt in the last few years we've gone backwards, and I think all of us probably feel the same way about that. So eradicating is a strong word, as Dee said, and it'll take a long time and hopefully someday, but I don't see it right now. What can be done? One thing is to get to know each other, people of other cultures, get to know people who come from different countries and so on. And then, just as many of you have talked about, education, things like this, and learning as much as we can so that we can be helpful in making some progress. I have two grandchildren who are Black, and so it's very important to me to see us make progress.
Very great. Thank you, Sandy. So there's a group that said they didn't have a spokes individual. So if there's someone from that group that would like to speak, you may.
Well, this is Christy. I was in this group.
Thanks, Christy.
And we did agree that it took us a little while to get started because people came and left. But what we decided was that we didn't see this happening in our lifetime, if ever, because the history of the world shows us that somebody always has to feel that they're above other people. We came from different backgrounds in our group, rural Nebraska, small town, and New York City. So we had seen different things, and the person who moved from New York City was shocked when she got to Nebraska and saw how white it was, so we have some hope, and mostly it's in the young people that they will have experiences different from those that we have had, and that they will carry the torch and maybe make progress, but elimination is a difficult road.
Thanks so much, Christy. So Charlene.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat because we talked about many of the things that have been already talked about. We did say a couple of things here. One, again, was very much we hope our young people will be the drivers behind a great deal of change. And we have hope that they will be, because of the way they're being raised and what they see and the way they're connected to the world that we weren't at that age. We believe that we need to learn more about each other and about the history of our nation, where it's gone wrong, and that change is going to require both personal and systemic changes, and that the two sort of go back and forth and feed off each other. If people don't care, if their hearts and minds are not worried about this process, then they don't push for change. If you can change the system, though, then that can also come back and influence some people whose hearts need to be still influenced. And the two things are intertwined. And the last thing I guess we ended on was believing that we need to get maybe more involved in the political process. Vote, for sure. Yeah. But talk to your elected representatives, support the ones that whose ideas you like, talk to the people whose ideas you don't like, and put forward what we believe is the right thing to do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We'll have Dory Bush next.
Here I am. By default, I am the one that is reporting for our group. And we did say a lot of the same things that many of the others have said. We were fortunate in our group to have Amir Azimi, who is on the mayor's task force for multicultural issues. I believe he said he's an architect. He's lived in Nebraska for 40 years. And he had some wonderful perspectives, including the fact that many times, because his skin is not white, that he may be asked what country he's from as a first question. And he is an immigrant from Iran, actually. And that was kind of an interesting thing. I also, some of the folks here know that my daughter-in-law's home is Lima, Peru. And she is brown skinned, and I have a 5-year-old, beautiful, bicultural, I will say, grandson. And I think what everyone has been saying, but I don't think it can be said often enough or strong enough, that we need to do a better job of talking with each other and talking with folks that are not like us. And some folks that are in this room also know that when I was a sophomore at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in 1964, I had a Black roommate for the entire year. Initially, I was rather upset about that, even growing up in Omaha. I was upset with myself as I look back that my reaction initially was not good, but I lived with her for an entire year. And that probably did a lot to help me understand that everybody doesn't look like me. And I think it's, but again, I just can't say strongly enough that I think the only way that we will even come close to eradicating racism is if we get a better handle on talking with folks that don't look or perhaps talk like we do.
That's really good. That's really good, Dory. Thank you so much. Dolores wanted to say that was forgotten to mention that they thought about the prison system really needs to be reformed as well. I'm so glad I got your name right too now, Dolores. So I think that's really important as well. Was there anyone else that we didn't hear something that everyone said that you would like to share?
We talked in our group about the movie 13th, 13th.
Yes.
It's on, it's free right now. It's been re-released from 2016 documentary about the prison system. I would encourage everyone to watch it. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. So you can just get it on your computer. And one of the things that stuck out at me is, and I'm going to get this percentage wrong, but I'm going to say 70% of the prisoners in our prison system are Black, and that 97% of those people have never had a trial. They were basically forced into a plea agreement. So it's just things like that that have been documented in this movie. You might want to watch it.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Thanks, Terry.
One other really quick thing is I just noticed today that our unicameral is in session and it's on TV. And Senator Wayne from Omaha has introduced a bill that would create oversight of the police in the different, I don't know if it's counties or what, but you might want to look into that and see what that is. So they're discussing that right now.
That's great to know, Terry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of you for your thinking and conversation and sharing. Great ideas. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on and learn a little bit more about systemic racism.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
I love that. We all have a role to play to make it better. All right, so now we're going to go into breakout rooms again. And from last time, remember, we need to find, and we're going to stay a shorter time. So it's going to be 5 minutes this time. Select someone, I think this is where you'll share, and we'll do random shares. You will get a notification to join the breakout room. You'll also get a notification to come back. But if you don't click come back, it'll bring you back anyway. So the questions for breakout room. How do you change something that you don't acknowledge? Interesting thought, right? Combating systemic racism starts with self. What might you do to stop systemic racism? Enjoy your conversations. All right, looks like everybody's back. So for this part, it's going to be individuals who would like to share. And all you have to do is unmute your mic, speak, try to be concise, but yeah, just go ahead and share. Combat system is self.
If that's okay, Dory Bush?
Yeah, go right ahead, Dory.
Okay, actually, we got, it wasn't nearly long enough for us to talk about these two issues, but the one I think we all agreed on was that until we acknowledge that there's something we need to change, it's never going to change. So yes. What we need to do is try to acknowledge that there are some things that are going to, about us, that are ingrained in the way maybe we've been brought up. And I guess I want to throw back something else that we didn't bring up at the other previous discussion. But I think our experiences generally, and especially in the state of Nebraska, can be based on a rural upbringing or a city upbringing. I mean, there are some real differences there. I'll share really quickly. I was a student assistant in the residence halls in the 60s. I happened to be on call one night. I got a call from a university resident. Again, this is like 1960s, okay? And the regent had been called by a constituent, and the constituent was concerned because their daughter was dating a black football player, and what was I going to do about it? Okay, so that was in the 60s, you know. I don't think we're going to get calls like that now. But the thing was that this young woman was from a town in western Nebraska, and probably she had never even seen a black person before she came to the university. And, you know, and then apparently her mom found out that this was going on and was upset about it, and just out of lack of knowledge. So I guess I'll go back again to what I said before, is that until we have a better understanding and open up ourselves to each other in dialogue, it's going to be difficult for anything to change. And a lot of it is that we need to have conversations with folks, again, that don't look like us. And I would say too, that kind of goes in the reverse as well too, because I think sometimes people that don't look like me, white and currently blonde, and getting grayer by the day, you know, we all don't understand each other very well. I think probably people of color don't always understand us as white folks. From where we're coming from. So I think that the dialogue has to happen from both sides.
I agree, Dory. That's great. That's great. I agree. Can I have two more people share, please?
Yeah, I would like to share and agree with what Dory says. I'm part of a group right now studying Me and White Supremacy, written by Layla Saad. And I'm discovering a lot of things about myself as are my partners, and it's just an excellent push to acknowledge what's inside of us and make some changes.
Yes, yes. I couldn't see who was speaking, but yes, who was that?
Sorry, that was Elsa.
Oh, thanks, Elsa. Thank you.
Was there a book, Elsa? Is that a book that you're looking at?
Yeah, Me and White Supremacy.
Okay, thank you.
Want to put it in the chat or?
Sure.
Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat.
It's best to do it in a group.
All right. So I'll take one more volunteer, please.
This is Amir Azimi.
Yes.
And they asked me to speak for our group. So our group, mainly they're white, and the experience is very similar to others, that when they came to university, they became aware of the differences and at least experiencing some different races. Well, I'm from Iran, as it was mentioned before. Well, I have similar experience because I didn't know I was a person of color till I came to university here.
Oh, wow.
So that's that part of it is But as far as what we can do, I know people, just like any other issues that we have, first is acknowledgement that we have that problem or that point of view. But I always talk about is acknowledgement is okay, but we need to understand the degree of biases that we have. For example, for a lot of people, they don't mind to work with me or someone, the person of color. There are people, the degree of, they don't mind to live next to me. But when it comes to it, can I marry your daughter? It's a different story. So I just want to emphasize from maybe the only person of color in our team that it's not just acknowledging that we have some of these biases and include all of us, but what is the degree of acceptance? What's the degree of being recognizing that we have biases and how far is that bias? Again, coworker is okay, neighbor is okay, marrying into the family is okay, being your doctor or you know, is okay. Can I touch you as a doctor or something? Those are the one, I just want to know the degree of it. So anyway, I just stopped now. So.
No, that's fantastic. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks so much. All right. So you all did great. This is, I could just sit here and just chat with y'all all night, this group, but we're going to have to move on. So we're going to talk about what does it mean to be anti-racist? The term anti-racist refers to people who are actively seeking not only to raise their consciousness about race and racism, but also to take action when they see racial power and equities in everyday life. I took this from a book called Racial Healing, and it is an exceptional racial healing handbook by Annalise Singh. I am in a book club with it. It is so good. It's for all races and all intersectionalities. It's a fantastic book. Two things that she talks about that are very, very important. All of you all talked about it tonight. And with Racial Healing, you all talked about education, educating yourself. You all talked about relationships, getting out of your comfort zone, interacting with other people. The book talks all about that and how important that is. There's another there's a theory, it's called the intergroup contact theory. And that plays right into the relationships of that theory. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the Robert Caves experiment, where they had 22 12-year-old boys, white, middle-class Protestants. They went to Roberts Cave State Park in Oklahoma, and they had two groups. They were separated, they developed their own norms, they came up with their own group names, and they competed against each other. And the only awards that were given if you won, it was all or none awards, right? So you can imagine the conflict, the verbal abuse, the physical attacks. Then they did a debriefing and the group had to get together. And then they had to actually work together as teams. And it all changed. They worked so well together. They achieved awards together. It was amazing. And they say it's an imperative that we all work together to increase our intergroup contact and experiences. So that's what we have to do, is work together. Now It Must Be Different is what we're pushing and talking about and believing in at Nebraska. So we all need to set an example by speaking out and speaking up. We all need to make connection, reach out to individuals that don't look like us, just like you said. And we also need to be informed, educating yourself about the experience of others and intersectionalities of others. George Floyd's been 60 days since the death of George Floyd. And here's some ways your life should have changed. You should have had uncomfortable conversations with family members, friends, and coworkers. You should have followed new accounts, authors, news sources that have changed your perspective on race, privilege, and justice. You should have recognized some of the times that you explicitly or implicitly contributed to the problem. You should have diversity and inclusion in your social groups as has taken a whole new meaning. Diversity and inclusion in your social groups should have taken a whole new meaning. You are reflective on situations you wish you had handled differently. You should have learned that there's a difference between not being racist and being anti-racist. You should feel more informed, but also feel like you have so much more to learn. You should have recognized how apparent racism may have been throughout your life. It may have been packaged in the form of jokes, just a part of high school, or just the way a certain family member was. You should have certain people have disappointed you, but so many others have inspired you. My call to action for us is, now that you know, what will be your narrative to ensure that this will be a movement and not just a moment? Dr. Barker.
So I know that we are almost at time, so I want to be sensitive to our time together today. So I won't go into detail, but what I will tell you is that this call to action is something that we have identified, the importance for us, that what we need to do at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Next slide, Jerry. And that we are thinking about this work and trying to get organized. Here are some of the actions that we're going to be taking. We have also been able to assemble a group of thought leaders to help our leadership, to help our chancellor in thinking through these issues. They certainly address some of the same topics that you rose, everything from thinking about policy to also identifying how do we elevate voices and make those more prevalent to increase awareness so that people become much more knowledgeable about these issues and certainly understanding history. Next slide. And so there are a number of resources that Dr. Kassebaum and I wanted to make sure that you had available. One of the resources that are going to be open to all of you is a new initiative that Dr. Kassebaum has launched called #Include. That's Nebraska's community of learners, understanding diversity through education. This, if you go to our website, diversity.unl.edu, this is a learning community open to all. And so we are inviting Nebraskans to be a part and to join us. The link is also provided into the chat, but to join us for sharing information, sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing your expertise. And so we are extremely excited to do some of this beginning building work, not only for our university, but to have this particular initiative for our entire state. Next slide. So we've unfortunately not had a lot of time for questions. It was such a great conversation, and so we're very appreciative. Maybe if there are one or two burning questions that people have, Dr. Kassebaum, if it's okay with you, we can take those.
Yes, that's fine.
Could I just make a comment? It'd be nice to have those slides, particularly the last set that we didn't have a chance really to take notes on or review. It would be good if you could send those perhaps to Bob Mickle, and Bob we could let Bob know if we wanted a copy.
Karen, are you okay with that?
Yes, Bob. We'll make a deck available.
Okay, very good.
Do we need to ask for it, or will you just send it to us?
Well, I'll work through Bob.
All right.
I'd sure like a connection to Muhammad Ali's video, if that's possible as well.
Yes, well, I'll take a look at the slides, and I'll send Bob a deck, and then he can forward it to anyone that's interested in the deck.
Happy to do that.
Are we likely to get an email that says you can request?
I think if I can do this and the way Jerry has explained it to me, I think I can get your emails from on the backside of this.
Correct.
And should be able to send this out to you.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a burning question.
Yes.
Their time. Okay, so my burning question that's bothering me is I'm hearing the backlash against Black Lives Matter. I'm hearing things like, well, Black Lives Matter was started by two people who are trained Marxists, and their names are out there. I heard that the Black Lives Matter is funded by George Soros, and then a dirty comment behind that. And then I saw, I've been seeing lots of ads from Joni Ernst, Governor or Senator Joni Ernst. And she's, I mean, it's kind of like hidden racism to me, but it's, she's talking about, oh gosh, anarchists and sending out federal troops. And she's got a bill that she's advertising for. I don't know how to exactly address those other than to say, if you just look at the thousands of people that are in Black Lives Matter, it's not like they're a bunch of Marxists or whatever, but I just wish I had more. I'm wondering how to combat those kinds of things.
I'm experiencing different feelings about that, Terry. I'm finding that all of that crap makes it so much easier for me to be talkative and to be supportive of and be an anti-racist. Now that that stuff is out and blatant, it's just so much easier for me to address. Maybe I'm weird that way, but I just... I wanted to say that earlier it was expressed that we felt things were going backwards, and I don't think we're going backwards, but I do think we've changed from being covertly racist and discriminatory in Nebraska to being more overt about it. And so that follows in with what you just said in terms of now that people are angry about it or talking about it or expressing their opinions about it, it's easier for us to also engage in the conversation. Whereas those feelings were there before, they just didn't all of a sudden show up. They've been there all along, it's just now we're talking about them. So I think that there's some, that's the, I guess the silver lining in the cloud, that that there's more conversation about it.
I think my comment would have been, is that fake news?
You mean about the Marxist?
Well, the problem is it's not fake news to a lot of people, and then it serves to polarize people even more.
No, but it just lets them know that you don't go along.
Oh, I see. That would be a reply to them.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been so fun. It sounds like more conversations. We need to be having more conversations. I just want to, Dr. Barker and I would like to thank you for your time this evening. I put in the chat that the video, this event was recorded. Therefore, it will be available on our website under webinars.